the first person has been convicted of assault following involvement in the anti-immigration protests. Over 400 arrests have now been made across the country, with more arrests and charges expected in coming days. But quite honestly, is our judicial system up to it after what's been described as more than a decade of underfunding? Paul Garlick KC is a criminal law barrister. Mr. Garlick, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Jane.
Are you confident that actually we're in the best place to deal with all this? Because actually it's happened at there's never a good time for this to happen, but it could hardly be worse, could it?
I don't think it could, and I'm not confident we're ready to deal with it. I'm a practicing barrister, but I also sit as a part-time judge. And in the last 6 months, so many cases have not been able to proceed because we just couldn't find a barrister to prosecute the cases because there are so few criminal barristers now.
Well, we heard Heidi Alexander speaking on Times Radio a little earlier, saying that, quite frankly, they're putting an appeal out. They want barristers and solicitors to make themselves available. But just on a practical note, it's August. They may not be in the country.
Well, quite. And you can't train barristers who practice in other fields, civil law, public law. You can't train them overnight to be criminal barristers. It will take months of experience. But that's just one problem, the barristers. The Crown Prosecution Service itself is under great strain. And so are the courts. Our court estate is pretty busy as it is. If you, as the government has said, courts can sit all night, that's all very well. You've got to find lay justices of the peace who are prepared to get up and work all night. You've got to find district judges, they're professional magistrates who are prepared to work all night. And certainly their terms of contract at the moment don't provide they work overnight. The prison service is the next problem. Just getting people to court, because most of the prison services now at courts are privately run. And quite often prisoners don't arrive at court until midday. And certainly on occasions when I've been sitting as a judge, I've had a message saying, if you're going to send someone into custody, can you do it this afternoon, please, and not this morning? Because we just do not have the physical space in the cells at the court.
Right. There are practical issues wherever you look, it would seem. We were told that when there were last really severe riots on this scale back in 2011, the courts did sit all night and magistrates were passing longer and tougher sentences. But right now, you're saying that neither of those things are possible remotely.
I don't think so. But as you said, particularly in August, at such short notice, you will have to find a prosecutor, you'll have to find a defender, you'll have to find prison officers, and you'll have to make space in the cells at courts. Because if you convict someone and send them to immediate custody, you've got to detain them in a cell. And quite honestly, quite often, there just aren't enough cells.
Looking at some of the faces of some of the people who have already gone before the courts for their alleged involvement in the events of the last couple of days, they are a pathetic bunch of people on the whole. They're not criminal masterminds. They are people who might well consider themselves to be disenfranchised. They haven't got a lot going on, and that's quite possibly why they got involved. When these people come before people like you, do you feel sympathy for them in some cases?
Well, each case depends on its facts. And if I watch body-worn video that the police officer's taken and I see that police officer being seriously assaulted and terrified, and think about his family, then whatever sympathy I might have had for the defendant evaporates pretty quickly. Because no matter what their advantage or disadvantage in life, if you behave like that, it's not just criminal, it's thuggery. And you're placing other people in real and realistic fear of their personal safety.
And the people who, in many cases, have instigated the trouble appear, to many of us, to be getting off scot-free. There don't appear to be consequences for the big boys here.
That's true. Obviously, CCTV and visual recognition is being used by the police now, but it's the people who incite this. I heard somewhere today that the first charge has been brought for inciting racial hatred on the media today. So the police are now looking at social media. And certainly, if you go on social media and you incite somebody, in other words, you encourage them or you assist them to commit a criminal act, then you are guilty as a secondary party and you can be charged and dealt with as a secondary party.
Yes, but as you've already pointed out, the system is no better equipped to deal with those cases than the others we've referenced. Thank you very much indeed for your time. That's Paul Garlick, who is a criminal law barrister and a KC.
The riots in the United Kingdom, making news as well around the world. They've got consequences, haven't they, these moments, for how the UK is viewed in Europe, Asia, the Middle East, the US. As we find our place in a new world, forging a new relationship with Europe, trying to sustain influence in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, and maintaining a special relationship with the US also a little bit in flux. How does this moment impact our standing in the world? Let's speak to Kim Darroch, who's a former UK ambassador to the US. Kim, hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for being with us. Can we just answer that central point first? And feel free to completely wipe me away here. But I've been thinking about this, about how this moment is being reported around the world. I mean, is it?
Oh, yes. Yes, it certainly is. Look, there's a huge international media community in the UK, mostly but not entirely based in London. But most countries will have media outlets here, newspapers, TV, radio. And for them, this will have been the lead story of the last 3 or 4 days. I was talking to an American journalist friend of mine this evening, and he has certainly written about it for his major American newspaper. He's only done it once, so he doesn't do it every day, but the 24-hour news outlets will cover it more fully. So it will be out there as a global story. Not necessarily the lead story everywhere, but a major story in most of the world.
Okay, let's talk about the EU then, where we're trying to sort of forge a new relationship, aren't we? We've got a lot of things to iron out with the European Union and European countries at the moment. How is this moment being viewed across Europe?
Well, I'd say there are two things here. First of all, it looks worrying, it looks disturbing, it doesn't look at all good. And a few weeks after a very positive story about that election and the very peaceful transfer of government, and a big and very stable-looking majority for the new government, you get these events which are damaging. But it's not as if no one else in Europe has been through this kind of thing. I mean, we can all, remember photographs of cars burning in Paris certainly within the last 12 months, and not just in France either. So there are issues like this, events like this happening across Europe. So we don't look entirely unique in this happening, but the fact that it's carried on for 3 or 4 days now, and to some extent spread to new cities, is pretty damaging. It really is.